Really what I wanted to go over today, and I'm going to keep it fairly high level, but I thought I would give you guys a little bit of an inside look at how social is working at big companies and has some implications for small companies and solopreneurs as well. And then talk a little bit about some of the examples that I've seen, and then I'll open it up if we have time to some questions. And I'm going to go through this a little bit fast, but if you guys want the full deck after I go through it, I'd be happy to share the full deck with you because I'm probably going to cover about half of the deck today. I have like 2 hours of material in here, and I never go through all 2 hours, so go ahead and get started. First, I'm wondering, in the room, how many people are anti-social? Everyone that's like, I am not going online, I am never going on Facebook, it's not for me. Anybody? Not one person? Wow, okay. Oh, there's one person. Where? Oh. You don't even want to raise your hand. You're like, I'm not even telling you. Okay, so we have one person in the room. How many people feel like they're listening online, but they're not, not doing a lot more than that? Oh, okay, so about 20%. Okay, how many people are listening and responding? Okay, that's about 80%. How about anybody in the room listening, responding, and actually involving the community and into your decision-making process for your business or for what you're working on? Oh, good. Okay. So it's that looks like about 30% of the room is actually fully engaged, it sounds like, with the community that you have. So a little bit about me. I had the great intro, but I worked at Comcast for almost 8 years, and I was there when, in 2007, we really started using social media more. And there was this point in my career, and the way that companies used to work is you would never proactively say that something was wrong until you were forced to, right? I started out in the PR department at Comcast, and I remember if there was ever an outage or something that happened, you could call in and find out, and it would take a while to get the answer. And then with social media, we had to let them know right away. People would be talking about it before we even knew there was an outage sometimes. So I remember at one point in my career, and this sounds funny to even share now, but there was really a terrible outage. It was the worst one we'd ever had. And it didn't last very long, but it was really bad. People were calling in, the phone lines were down because so many people were calling in. And so I went online on social media and I told everybody, actually on Twitter is where I started, and I said, we're aware of the outage, we're working on the problem, and as soon as we have an answer, I'll be updating this Twitter stream. And as I pressed send, I thought, well, I might only have 15 more minutes to work in this job. Because we were being so transparent. It was kind of going from 0 to 100. We were so transparent with something that was wrong before the media called or anything happened, where we had to tell them. I mean, yes, the phone lines were down, but King 5 hadn't called yet. We didn't have anybody calling saying, is there an outage yet? So I think, that might give you a little bit of insight of how much social media is actually changing these big companies. They're having to get out there and talk about it. And it might sound like a small thing, but really the discussions and the things that are happening inside of these companies, there's a lot of change happening and it's being forced. So it's pretty interesting. And then I was hired to consult at Google and give them, their small business team, a full social media strategy. And we created an influencer program for them where we brought people like Chris Brogan in, if you guys are familiar with Chris Brogan, best-selling author of Trust Agents and a few other books. We brought him into Google and he was one of our influencers for Google. So we really formed an influencer program within Google with social. And then Nordstrom recruited me to lead their social and digital efforts. So that was what I've been doing most recently. And just 2 weeks ago, I just announced that I joined Decide.com as VP of Marketing and PR. So I had to throw this in there really quickly. This is sort of the way that it used to work, right, with our networks and our friends. And this is a little bit of what it looks like on social media. As you guys well know in this room, seeing how many people are totally connected, but I think it's probably been fun for all of us to see this happen, where we can share information and ideas. And I just saw a photo that was shared by Daryl Benedict. Does anyone know Daryl in the room? He used to work at King 5 for a long time. He shared this photo on Facebook the other day, and it got thousands of shares. I mean, it literally was everybody in Seattle, I think, must have seen that. Actually, I should send it out because I'm sure you guys saw it, you just didn't know who took it. But it's really fun to see that because Daryl's actual community is really small of who he talks to and who he's friends with. But his online community, through 2 friends who have a huge network, really to just those 2 people who happen to know almost everybody in Seattle that shared that photo. So how are we doing? I want to throw this up here so at least I have one cute animal in my presentation, right? But I wanted to throw this in because even though we're sort of in this advanced stage of social media, at least we think we are, we've been using social channels for so long and we think we really know what we're doing, we're still really doing a terrible job. And we're doing some things, we're doing just a few things wrong a lot. So the first one that I would throw out there, and I think there's implications not only for big businesses but for small businesses too, is that we're being really reactive, right? So we see somebody else do something and then we think, oh, that's a great idea, let's do that. And we're just grabbing for things here and there instead of really putting together a full plan and goals of why we want to use these channels. And not only goals around why we want to use them, but then maybe even down to who are like the 20 or 50 people we want to connect with on these channels and proactively going after those people. I talked to a lot of people about social media, and I would say still, even at these big companies, when I talk to their social strategists, about 90% of them still don't have a really good plan or a goal and then know who they want to reach. But the ones who do, just those few that do, I mean, then they know what success looks like and they are so successful because they know what that goal they're going for. And by the way, if you're going to set a goal, why not have the goal be, I want to be the best in Seattle or the best in the world, right? Why not shoot for that? So if it's a photographer, why not be the best in Langley? I mean, there's a lot of photographers in here, right? So maybe you don't be like, who's it going to be? but I mean, I think that's the way that you can think, and social can really help you with those types of things. Number 2, so finding your voice. There's this idea of life casting or idea casting, live streaming or idea casting. And I think some people try to merge the two a lot of times. So you'll see somebody talking about work and then all of a sudden their stream is full of sports updates. And a lot of people will unfollow them, right? So there's nothing wrong with that if that's how you want your feed to be, but you might want to be a little bit more strategic about it. So again, back to why you're using your channels, and then figure out not only from that effort, but then how much of the sports game are you going to share, given that you're connected with a whole bunch of photographers who might not care about the Red Sox, let's say. They probably care a lot more about the Mariners, but. So I think I see a lot of people doing that wrong, and one thing that I even do is then I'll go in and I'll hide that person from my feed. I won't unfriend them, but I'll usually hide them, but I will never add them back. I just won't even think of adding them back. So being really strategic about how you're curating your information and whether you see it as life casting or idea casting. And what that mix is. Number 3, so one thing that's really helped me, and it sounds like most of you in this room, from what I heard a little bit about today, already have this, really figuring out what your niche is and going after that niche. There are so many different pockets of really passionate people. Did anybody in the room ever try Empire Avenue? I'm kind of glad that nobody's tried it. It's this sort of goofy social network where you can invest in other people and then you can like sell your stock in those people if you think that they're not going to be successful in the future.
You can short them?
So, what was that?
You short them?
Yeah, you can short people, right? So I mean, Clout's already kind of got this weird thing going on with, which I'm not a huge fan of Clout. I understand the reasoning for it, and many companies use Clout. Are you guys in the room familiar with Clout? Yeah, okay. I mean, you have to check your score, right? But like, still, it's sort of goofy. But this was like way further down the road of being kind of goofy. But it was interesting because Ford went on and had a presence on Empire Avenue, and then they decided, oh, this is not for us, so they took themselves off of it. But I couldn't believe that they even did it because it's not something that most companies want to do, is sell stock in your fans. Sorry, we thought you were a great fan, but you're not anymore. So anyway, really figuring out what your niche is, and if you know that really well, you won't do things like Empire Avenue like Ford did. I mean, they tried it and they decided not to. Just skipping to the last one, I think the last thing that we do is a lot of times we're way too serious or really, really boring on social channels. So I've been spending a majority of my time lately trying to figure out how can I be more creative and how can I be more fun. And that's really been my focus. It's been much less on social and the social channels, because we're all so familiar with social channels, right? It's been, how can I really get creative with the things that I want to communicate and share, instead of just sharing them in the same boring way that we've been sharing them for a long time. All right, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but I will say that my time at Comcast, I feel like everybody should work at Comcast at some point in your career because you will be so humble for the rest of your life. There's a lot of customer service discussions and a lot that happened, but we were able to turn that around with social, and I'm guessing some of you may have heard about Frank, who is our customer service guru. We got it down to, by the way, so he started working on customer service in his spare time. He started at night and sort of broke company policy to get social going, and then really became such a success that they gave him a team of 10 other people. And this is actually a screenshot from a long time ago. He's got like 50,000 followers now. But he's really a great success story, and so his niche was customer service. He's all about customer service. So if anybody wants to learn more about how to be better at customer service, they go to Frank now. He just came out with a book 2 weeks ago called At Your Service, and it gives you an inside look at Comcast and what kind of the role that he went through in his journey figuring out how to use social for a company. But we really turned it around to the point where Brian Roberts said, we're engaged in a different kind of dialogue with our customers, and Twitter has changed the culture of the company. So this is a big company, but this is happening even for really small companies and small groups as well. And so what we did, the first thing that we did, I brought the team together and we put this really on paper and tried to figure out why are we on social and what do we want to do with it. And we decided that we want to provide the best customer service in the world. So if anybody talked about online social media customer service or support, we wanted them to think of Nordstrom. And the second one, increased engagement. This is a big one because I still hear this all the time. In fact, I heard it today. People say, well, we need to get a network of like 2 million people. And has anybody heard that? Or like, and you can go buy fans. I think you can buy Twitter. I mean, I did an experiment and set my dog up on Twitter and bought fans for her on Twitter. Bought 1,000 fans for her for I think it was like 25 bucks. And I have to say 999 of those were spam. And like I think there was one real person in there who we happened to get in when we bought followers, but it was a whole bunch of like teeth whiteners. Like these people doing all kinds of random things that it was no value to this account. And so it was kind of an interesting little test that we did with our dog's Twitter account. But I want to go back to this increased engagement because when I started at Nordstrom, we were talking a lot about how do we get to 12 million fans. And it was a really difficult thing to convince the company that we needed to focus on engagement versus number of fans. Because we were sending out posts, sometimes not getting any response. And I was actually not using Nordstrom as the best example of companies here in Seattle when I was out speaking. They weren't even on my radar as like a company who was even doing a decent job. So when you look at, if you send a post out and not one person likes it, reshares it, or does something on it, then I would say that that's a failure. Even if you have 12 million fans, I don't care how many fans you have, like it's a complete failure. So the way that we measured success at Nordstrom, just boiling everything down to it, and this is the way that I measure success, and I ask all the small businesses I work with to measure success, is looking at what are all the different ways where you can, every time you put out a post, a photo, or whatever you're sharing, get the most amount of engagement as possible. And there's a lot of tactics or ways you can do that, but just thinking of measuring success in that way, and then once you have a baseline, how can you increase that and make it more, and attract the right kind of people who are valuable versus buying fans and getting all these affiliate marketers or whoever they are. I think they're actually, a lot of them are robots. So I know it sounds like you guys have talked a lot about that today, and if we have time for Q&A, I'd love to hear more about what you talked about. But I think that if there's only one thing that you take away from this, it's that one point around really connecting, figuring out how to measure success on the connections that you have rather than the number of fans. Although I would say the number is really important. If you're doing a good job, then you're going to attract the right people anyway, and you're going to get a bigger network. And I won't go through the rest of this, but if you guys want to take a look, you can. The other thing that we did is figured out what we wanted our tone and our voice to be, kind of going back to that idea of life casting or idea casting. What type, if they were to describe your business as a person, how would you want them to describe you? And once you have that down on paper, you know when something's an outlier, you know when something's not an outlier. So the second exercise that I did after I started at Nordstrom was I sat everybody down. Actually, I'm a huge fan of brainstorming, And there's a book called Gamestorming, if anybody also likes brainstorming. Even when I help small businesses, I tell them if they can bring other people in, including possibly an influencer program. We can talk about that later if you want. To talk about ideas, it's a really good thing. So I brought my team together, and then I brought some people from other different parts of the business together, and we said, Nordstrom had never done this before. We didn't really have like a tone or a voice. We said, if somebody were to describe Nordstrom, how would we want them to describe us? And first we went through an exercise and we said, how would they describe us right now? And we thought some people would have described Nordstrom as TMZ, and some people would have described Nordstrom as Vogue, right? So we have this big disparity of how people are describing us. Nothing wrong with it, but again, that was because we were so reactive and just looking at what other people were doing and trying to copy it almost. So we took this exercise and we put this all down on paper, and then we knew when we were being a little bit more like TMZ and when things weren't working. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's all about being a really trusted friend and this whole idea of fashion in a humble customer service way. So another thing I've been thinking a lot about is, as a brand or even as a solopreneur, can you have your brand act like a friend online? Because this is something that people are really not doing right. So I have a couple big company examples, but I like what Oreo does. There's actually an app where you can pick a fan of the week. So they feature fans every week. So does Skittles. Oops. And this is So Skittles also does this thing. Going back to the idea of fun, they will. Anybody can do these types of things, right? It doesn't have to be Skittles. By the way, has anybody seen Skittles' Facebook page? No? They have to have a comedian running this page. It is so funny. You should just go check it out. I mean, every time I go to their page, I start laughing and I really wonder like who's writing their posts, but I'm totally convinced that they hired a comedian. But this is just one of the photos that they shared, and so they coat different things with Skittles and give them away to their fans. So this is a bike that they coated with Skittles and gave it away. And it was a huge success. I mean, like they're having so much fun on their page. And yes, you might say, well, Skittles is a brand that can have fun, but really any brand can have a little bit more fun, right? And have fun with their community. This is Oreo. They created a campaign where they invited fans to show them how they eat their Oreos. And this couple had a little dunking contest together and sent it back to Oreo. So they had all these videos online, all this user-generated content. It was a pretty big success, and they actually ran this in Germany. Yeah. So this is Jolcona. I am an advisor for this group. They're a newer nonprofit located in Seattle. The people who, it's a couple who came out of Microsoft that started this nonprofit. And then why I wanted to bring up this page is actually a little bit, they've just updated their website, but what you can see on this homepage, they give you all kinds of reasons and all kinds of ways to connect with them and share their story, right? So back to user-generated content. I don't know if you guys can read this, but look, so it says, invite your friends to the Jolcona community, take part in the discussion happening on the Jolcona blog, follow us on Twitter, use Jolcona badges to raise awareness, become a fan of Jolcona, join our LinkedIn group, or the last one, become a featured donor by sharing your story. So that last one, you used to have to go out and get testimonials that you want to put on your website. Now we've got testimonials coming into you just automatically, so you don't have to go do that work. It's almost like making your website work for you. And this one was really successful. We had people who were just so excited and wrote in and just shared these really powerful stories that we're able to feature on the homepage. By the way, one of the other things that we also did is, I'm a pretty big fan of video. A lot of times you can't get King 5 to come out and cover your story, so why not cover it yourself and just have people tune in? So we also had, one of our events, we had a live stream, and we had people from Europe joining, and they even donated from Europe, right? So here we are in Seattle with this little live stream. Literally, it was like this computer, and we used the camera in the computer, so it was nothing fancy. But we just talked to the online community. We reshared the live stream link out on all our social channels, and you never know where people are going to join when you do that, because there's people from all over the world that are watching. So I'm not going to go through the Blood Center. There we go. But really quickly, so I also did a campaign with United Way. We called it Give 10. The idea was that we wanted to have food at everyone's table for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So it was really a 2-week campaign, and this was an experiment for us. We only did the campaign on social channels, so it was the first time United Way had ever done this before. We didn't really do it offline at all. So we created a Twitter account, and at this point, Comcast joined in with them, so it was a joint partnership. So really, anytime you can partner with big companies, it's always a good thing, right? You can use their network as well. So we created a Twitter account, we created a Facebook page, we had events, we sent an email out, we created videos on YouTube telling the story of Seattle's homeless. We had live stream announcements, and then Comcast has 30-second PSAs that they'll run for free. So we did some of those and had those run. If anybody's interested in learning more about that, I can help you with that too. So it was really interesting. Since we only did it on social channels, we weren't sure what would happen, what would be the result. And probably no surprise to you guys, the result was that we raised $50,000. But that really wasn't, I mean, we thought we might raise like $250,000. Like, this is United Way, right? We have the biggest United Way in the whole country here in Seattle, King County United Way. But what did happen, even though we didn't raise the amount of money we thought we would, was that the story went everywhere. Like, this give 10, it was such a simple concept. Give $10, tell 10 friends. So it went online, and it was just reshared and reshared and reshared. And then King 5 calls, they do a story on it. Como did a story on it. It was like every local channel ended up doing a story on it. But it started on social. So from a money standpoint, not so successful, but from an awareness and a branding standpoint, I think it was a home run. It was a huge success. Ben & Jerry's. So going back to the idea of being fun and creative, and Ben & Jerry's, yes, they have a lot of money because they're a big company, or they have a decent amount of money. But really, anybody can do these types of things now with a lot of the tools that are out there. This one, a little bit tougher, but what they did was they had this campaign where you could enter a tweet in here, and all the characters that you didn't use would be filled up with their message for Fair Trade Day, World Fair Trade Day. So you can see here, and they were kind of fun. Attention, World Fair Trade Day is May 14th, fair tweets. Some of them were kind of a little bit funny. But it was such a fun campaign to see, like, if you entered one less character, what would be filled in. So it was pretty successful. 12 million tweets, 1,000 blog mentions, 43,000 site visits from 100 different countries. I thought that was a great example of getting creative. And again, this type of idea, you don't have to do it big. You can do it on a smaller budget with just this mindset. So I'm going to skip to my last. Get to the last thing here that I want to cover. By the way, really quickly, Skittles. Kind of going back to this is I talk a lot about engagement, and this is some of the examples on engagement. But like this post if you liking likable posts, plus you dig ferrets. I mean, it's just a post to get engagement. But I do want to say there's this whole idea of once you get a lot of engagement on a post, follow it up with another post. At that moment in time, so many people put a post out there and just watch it and see how it does. But when you have one successful post that has a lot of engagement, if you follow it up with the second one, people are already looking at your page and they're already going to see it, and it's an amazing tactic, by the way, to get more people to look at your content. So I wanted to cover this. So this is something that we created and we worked on with the Google leadership team, because a lot of people are still trying to figure out, how do I understand social media? What is it all about social media, and what is the real value in it? I mean, still the CEOs and the C-suite have a hard time understanding how it all works. So we actually put it down on paper and we created a social media journey. And I cut them off because it would be really hard to read if I had the whole thing. But when I give the slides to Russell, I can have them in there. I can have the full journey included so you guys can see it. And it looks a little different, obviously, for every company, but we really narrowed it down to 5 different stages. So these are the first 4, traditional, dabbling in silos, operational, and then you're starting to see real results. So we always thought Starbucks is in this 4th one, but there's actually a 5th. And the 5th one is, and this is actually longer, but I wanted to just take out this one part of it. The 5th one is the type of validation that you hear from your customers when you're doing a good job. And I think this goes for any type of business, even if you're a one-person business. So these are the types of things that you're going to hear, whether you have one client or thousands of clients. I trust you, I recommend you, I feel valued and heard, you anticipate my needs, So my favorite one on this list was, that was my idea. So when I was at Nordstrom, I was always trying to figure out how could we get the community to tell us that was my idea. And there's work back from that, right? So it's almost like we wrote our headline and then we're working back to try to figure out how we could get there. You don't make me guess. I would never buy competitors' products. This is one that I think people in this room can get to. My life hobby is better because of you. You inspire me. The type of photography that you take is really inspiring, and I want to learn more about how to do that. So I just wanted to share that because this was really helpful for the Google team to understand a little bit more about how we can build trust and why we're even using social media channels. So I'm going to end it there, but I don't know if we have time for any questions.
A few minutes.
Okay, a couple minutes. But again, I'll be happy to share all the slides and put the full social media journey back in here if you guys can see it.
Stick around tomorrow? Or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rich?
You guys, I know you guys have been here all day.
We have a question over here. We have one question over there.
I just think one of the biggest challenges for folks, I guess what you're calling solopreneurs, is just balancing things. And do you have any recommendations for the strategy you might give people in kind of being consistent about engaging? Because I feel like there's a challenge if you come up with content and then, a lot of us are going through fieldwork, production, and then outreach. And I guess just advice for balancing it all and consistency with engaging with folks is such a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Well, one thing, a lot of times when I work with small businesses, I ask them to use Hootsuite. This is very, very tactical level, but first figuring out what your goals are and then how to work back. But and I actually tell them to block off 2 points in time in their day. And I say 10 minutes, although of course you can be 2 hours, and it's really hard to stick to 10 minutes once you're online. But I say, you have to promise me that you're going to block off 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. And what I want you to do, and Hootsuite's great because you can actually build lists and build columns. Is everybody familiar with Hootsuite?
No.
So it's like a social media dashboard. It's almost like Outlook, but it's for all of your different social channels. So you can bring in LinkedIn, you can bring in Facebook, you can bring in Twitter. And they're all in one view for you. And it's a free tool up until I think if you add like your 4th network, and then it starts costing, and then you have to pay for it. But I use it personally, I don't pay. I just use my main networks. But what you can do is you can build a column in there. So you can build a column that said, for instance, anybody who mentions Langley and photography, I want that to come up in this column. And so basically it's just tailoring it so everything's there for one view, so you actually can just spend 10 minutes instead of all day wading through all of this information. And usually I help them actually set it up. One thing that's really helped me too is my favorite social media tool is Twitter, and I have a list, like I talked a little bit about, of like 50 people who I really admire and or find that like if I could, I would want them to be my mentor. And I added them to a Twitter list, and every single day I just look at that list and I see what those 50 people are doing. And I look at other people too, but I spend a lot of time looking at those 50. And then I end up connecting with them more because I respond to them and I'm just paying more attention to those 50 people. And for me, it's opened up some amazing relationships as far as like being featured in the media. It's created so much serendipity that it's been pretty cool. So I think that for me has been really helpful. And then just building it into your daily life. So if you read a great story, then share it out right as you read it instead of moving on to the next task right away. I don't know, is that helpful? Okay. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about having your personal Facebook versus your brand? So I'm a sole proprietor and Melanie Connor, and I have Melanie Connor Photography Facebook page also, but then I have LinkedIn. So I'm not really sure where I begin and business.
I think there's so many different ways to approach it as as an entrepreneur. I think one thing a lot of people do is they don't have a separate page, and then their friends just know that they're going to be posting about their business. Maybe if you're a tax accountant, that's not as interesting. So it really depends on the type of business. Are you a photographer? Oh yeah. So one thing that you could consider is, are people friending you on both? Or they're following you and they're friending you?
There's a kind of a mixture. It isn't very clear. Most people are just my Facebook friends, and then there's this additional photography page, and so I'm not really sure that photography page does, and
Yeah.
clients are, you know, professionally, it's LinkedIn, but then it's just confusing,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it is.
Well, it's really whatever you're comfortable with. I would say you could just have your page, because now when Facebook opened up subscribers, so before it really was more for your friends, but now, for instance, one of my friends has 80,000 subscribers on Facebook, and she's not even like, she doesn't speak or anything, she just has really great updates, and so all these people have started following her, and she doesn't go out to events, or, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that somehow she had that many people, but it's easier because it's one place to update, and then she just maybe shares a little less of the personal stuff that she might share. She does that more in person. So that could be, I mean, that might be one easy way.
Yeah.
But you also might want to just start doing some testing, like posting some message on there and see how many people are responding, or you know, different types of messages to see like which one works better for the business updates or for the you know, your business photos. Yeah. Anybody else in the room have suggestions for on that specific topic? Anybody else have some best practice there?
There's a really good article that Hanson Hossein has posted on his Storyteller Uprising blog on why he gave up Facebook for his personal life, and he's only using it for his professional. But he takes you through some steps, and it's a really interesting thing. It's a moral choice.
That was a great post.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I want to say one more thing really quick on that. You guys might not be fans of Google+, a lot of people aren't, but it's amazing for SEO. So even if you only go on Google+ and post like twice a month, I would totally recommend that you at least have a presence on there, and every once in a while add updates.
We're going to have to call it because the restaurant's closing in about half an hour. So thank you, Shauna.
Thank you so
Thank you.